There is a reason your mind has felt unusually restless lately, and it is not because you are distracted, overwhelmed, or losing focus. Something much deeper has been moving beneath the surface of your awareness, building pressure quietly, almost invisibly, until this very morning when the energy finally reaches a turning point that cannot be ignored anymore. What begins today is rare enough to matter, but the intensity surrounding it now makes it impossible to treat like another ordinary astrological shift. This is not simply Mercury moving from one zodiac sign into another, the way it routinely does throughout the year. This is the moment the planet responsible for thought, language, perception, memory, interpretation, and mental speed steps back onto its own ground, reclaiming full authority over the part of your life connected to communication and consciousness itself. And the second Mercury enters Gemini this morning, everything changes pace. The atmosphere around you changes. Your thoughts change. The rhythm inside your nervous system changes. It may even feel as though something dormant inside your brain suddenly switches back on after being asleep for far too long. But what makes this transit truly explosive is not just Mercury returning home. It is what greets Mercury the moment it crosses that doorway. Within mere hours of entering Gemini, Mercury runs directly into Uranus, the planet associated with disruption, revelation, sudden awakenings, and moments that split your reality into before and after. This is the kind of alignment that does not gently guide you toward understanding. It shocks you into it. It interrupts old mental patterns so forcefully that the way you once interpreted your life can no longer survive unchanged. Over the next 6 days, 3 separate realizations begin unfolding through your experiences, your conversations, your emotions, and even the random thoughts that seem to arrive from nowhere. These are not small insights. These are the kinds of messages that permanently rearrange how you think about yourself, your future, and the truth you have been avoiding. The clarity entering your life during this period does not unfold slowly or politely. It arrives all at once, almost aggressively, like lightning tearing through fog. And once you see what this energy reveals, there is no returning to the comfort of your previous perspective. That is why the strange mental surges you have been experiencing lately matter so much. The racing thoughts, the sudden flashes of understanding, the odd feeling that your intuition has been trying to get your attention. None of it has been random. Your inner world has been reacting to this shift long before it fully arrived. Somewhere deep inside, your mind already sensed that something massive was approaching, and now the moment is finally here. Today marks the beginning of a mental awakening that has been building for weeks behind the scenes, even if you did not consciously recognize it at the time. When Mercury enters Gemini at exactly 6:30 in the morning, astrology considers this one of the strongest positions Mercury can possibly occupy, because Gemini is not unfamiliar territory for this planet. Gemini is Mercury's own domain, the environment where its abilities become amplified without resistance or distortion. In astrology, whenever a planet returns to the sign it rules, its influence becomes intensified, pure, and unmistakably powerful. Mercury in Gemini does not hesitate. It does not move cautiously. It accelerates everything connected to thinking, speaking, learning, processing, and understanding. After spending the last 2 weeks inside the slower and heavier energy of Taurus, your mind has been operating at a completely different frequency. Taurus forced you to slow down and examine what felt secure, stable, practical, and materially important. It made you sit with questions longer than you wanted to. It made certain decisions feel delayed or frustratingly heavy. For many people, it felt as though their thoughts were trapped in thick emotional gravity, unable to move freely. But that slower pace was not punishment. It was preparation. Because the moment Mercury crosses into Gemini today, the mental gears shift instantly. Suddenly, your brain begins connecting information faster. Conversations become sharper, ideas appear rapidly, You may notice yourself multitasking more naturally, understanding hidden meanings quicker, or suddenly realizing patterns that were invisible only days ago. It can feel almost overwhelming at first because your awareness begins moving faster than your emotions can comfortably process. But this is not meaningless chaos. This is precision awakening at incredible speed. The universe has been constructing this moment carefully throughout the entire month of May, piece by piece, pressure by pressure, realization by realization. Nothing unfolding now exists separately from what has already happened. In fact, the last 2 weeks were preparing your mind to handle what is arriving today. When Mercury entered Taurus on May 2nd, the energy became slower and more grounded for a reason. Your attention turned toward questions involving value, survival, relationships, money, stability, and emotional security. You were being forced to think carefully about what truly matters to you beneath the distractions of everyday life. Then came May 5th, when Mercury formed a square to Pluto, creating one of the most psychologically intense moments of the month. That energy pushed hidden truths upward, whether you were ready or not. For some people, it appeared through difficult conversations they could no longer avoid. For others, it surfaced as uncomfortable realizations about finances, emotional attachments, unhealthy patterns, or fears they had buried for years. Pluto has a way of exposing what the mind tries to hide from itself, and during that square, something inside you was confronted directly. Then, on May 6th, Pluto stationed retrograde, intensifying the internal pressure even further. The transformation stopped being external and became deeply personal. Suddenly, you were no longer able to escape reflection. The emotions, fears, or truths revealed during the Mercury-Pluto square demanded deeper examination. It forced you to sit with your discomfort instead of outrunning it. But the story did not end there. On May 14th, Mercury aligned perfectly with the Sun in a powerful astrological event known as a cazimi, when a planet sits in the heart of the Sun itself. This alignment acted like a breakthrough point after weeks of mental heaviness and internal pressure. Everything that previously felt confusing suddenly began organizing itself into understanding. Many people experienced an unexpected realization during that period, a moment where a confusing situation suddenly made complete sense, where a difficult decision became obvious, or where an emotional truth finally crystallized with undeniable clarity. It was as though the pressure you had been carrying internally finally transformed into awareness. And now today, with Mercury entering Gemini and colliding with Uranus almost immediately afterward, that awareness evolves into activation. The thoughts that have been forming quietly inside you are no longer willing to stay hidden. Something is about to awaken in the way you see reality itself. And as this energy continues unfolding over the coming days, you are going to understand why your soul has felt so restless leading up to this moment. What you experienced during the cazimi was not random mental clarity appearing out of nowhere. It was the result of weeks of pressure finally transforming into understanding. All the confusion, emotional heaviness, uncertainty, and internal noise that had been building throughout the previous 2 weeks was being compressed into something sharp enough for you to finally recognize. The cazimi acted like a fire, burning away distortion from your perception, forcing your mind to separate truth from fear, intuition from overthinking, and reality from the stories you had been telling yourself just to stay comfortable. That moment was never meant to leave you unchanged. It was designed to prepare you for what begins now. And then came tonight, the Taurus new moon, the final energetic reset before this massive shift fully activates. This lunation is not passive. It is not soft background energy drifting quietly through the cosmos. It is the grounding point that locks everything you have realized recently into physical existence. Every insight born from the cazimi is now being planted like a seed into reality itself. Intentions become heavier now. Thoughts carry consequences now. What you choose to believe about yourself during this window begins shaping the next chapter of your life in ways you may not fully understand yet. The universe has been calibrating this entire sequence with terrifying precision. First, your thoughts slowed down. Then pressure exposed hidden truths. Then clarity emerged from the chaos. Then the Taurus new moon anchored those realizations into your physical world. All of it has been preparation for this exact moment, because once Mercury enters Gemini this morning, the ignition sequence finally begins. At exactly 6:30 in the morning, the energetic frequency governing your mind changes almost instantly. You may feel it emotionally before you understand it intellectually. Something becomes sharper, faster, more electric. The mental fog begins disappearing so quickly it almost feels unnatural. But the truly shocking part is what happens next, because Mercury does not quietly settle into Gemini and gradually unfold its influence over time. Less than 14 hours later, at exactly 10:08 at night, Mercury forms an exact conjunction with Uranus at 1 degree and 14 minutes Gemini. This is not ordinary astrology. This is psychological acceleration at a level that can permanently alter how you process reality. Mercury, the ruler of thought, communication, perception, and mental movement, enters its home sign operating at full strength, then immediately collides with Uranus, the force associated with awakening, disruption, revolution, and sudden flashes of consciousness. The result is not subtle. It is explosive. Imagine a lightning strike entering directly into the structure of your mind itself. That is the kind of energy arriving now, and this moment marks the first of 3 messages that are about to radically transform your inner world. The first message is unmistakable. Your mind is waking up in a way it has not for years. Uranus does not gently introduce change. Uranus destroys outdated patterns by shocking you into awareness. When Mercury and Uranus meet inside Gemini, the sign connected to rapid mental processing and information exchange, your brain begins functioning differently. This is not simply inspiration or creativity. This is a complete reorganization of mental circuitry. You may suddenly receive thoughts that feel unlike anything you have ever considered before. Ideas can appear fully formed without logical progression, almost as though they were downloaded directly into your awareness from somewhere beyond ordinary thinking. There are moments under this energy where answers arrive instantly after weeks or months of confusion. Problems that once felt impossible suddenly become obvious. But what makes this experience unsettling is how unnatural the clarity feels. It does not seem like something you consciously figured out. It feels remembered, as though a hidden part of you already knew the truth, and this transit simply removed the barrier blocking access to it. That is why this energy feels so intense psychologically. Your nervous system is not accustomed to operating at this speed. Some people will feel electrified under this transit, unable to sleep, unable to stop thinking, unable to calm the constant flood of realizations rushing through their minds. Others may mistake the intensity for anxiety because the body struggles to process so much stimulation at once. It can feel like drinking 10 cups of coffee, even when you have consumed nothing at all. Thoughts race faster than language can express them. Emotions become mentally amplified. Conversations suddenly carry hidden meaning you were previously blind to. But the way this energy affects you depends entirely on whether you resist it or allow it to move through you naturally. The more tightly you cling to outdated thinking patterns, the more chaotic this transit feels. If you try forcing these revelations to fit inside the old version of yourself, frustration intensifies quickly. But if you allow your mind to explore unfamiliar perspectives without fear or judgment, breakthroughs begin happening almost immediately. This is why those strange intuitive bursts you have experienced recently mattered so much. The random realizations, the sudden insights appearing from nowhere, the strange sensation that your mind was trying to communicate something urgent to you before you could consciously understand it. You were already sensing this energetic shift long before it fully arrived. Today simply removes all doubt about what has been happening internally. The first message becomes impossible to ignore. Your consciousness is evolving. The structure of your thinking is changing. And whether you feel exhilarated or overwhelmed, the process has already begun. But the story does not stop with Uranus, because the next message Mercury delivers reaches much deeper than mental awakening alone. If today acts like a lightning strike, waking up your awareness, what follows forces you to confront the truth, hiding underneath everything you have been trying not to feel. On May 19th, just 2 days after the Uranus conjunction, Mercury forms an exact trine with Pluto, retrograde at 5 degrees and 28 minutes Gemini to Aquarius. And this is where the energy stops feeling exciting and starts feeling transformative. Pluto is not interested in keeping you comfortable. Pluto exposes what has been buried beneath denial, fear, distraction, and emotional avoidance. When Mercury forms a trine to Pluto, while Pluto moves retrograde through the subconscious layers of the psyche, the mind gains direct access to truths it has spent years hiding from itself. Suddenly, the conversations you avoid become impossible to ignore. Emotional patterns reveal their origins. The masks people wear become transparent. You begin recognizing motivations, manipulations, fears, and hidden emotional wounds with disturbing clarity. And the most uncomfortable part is that this energy does not only expose the truth about others, it exposes the truth about you, the part of yourself that already knows what needs to change, the part that recognizes where you have betrayed your own instincts, the part that understands which chapters of your life can no longer continue the way they have been. This transit pulls those realizations directly into consciousness, whether you feel emotionally prepared for them or not. And as these truths begin surfacing over the coming days, you are going to understand why the universe first had to awaken your mind before asking you to face what has been hidden beneath it all. What begins unfolding under this Mercury and Pluto trine is not ordinary awareness. It is the kind of perception that cuts through illusion so cleanly that it becomes impossible to pretend you do not see what is standing directly in front of you anymore. This energy sharpens the mind into something almost surgical. Conversations suddenly carry hidden meanings you were blind to before. People's behaviors begin revealing motives beneath their words. Surface-level explanations stop satisfying you because your intuition immediately senses when something deeper is hiding underneath. This is investigative intelligence awakening at full force, the ability to recognize manipulation, emotional distortion, avoidance, and half-truths with almost uncomfortable accuracy. And because Mercury forms a harmonious trine to Pluto instead of a harsh or explosive aspect, the experience does not necessarily arrive through chaos or destruction. In many ways, it feels strangely natural, almost effortless, as though your consciousness is finally syncing with truths that have always existed beneath the surface, waiting for you to notice them. You may find yourself asking questions you normally avoid. You may suddenly stop accepting vague answers from people around you. Certain conversations will become emotionally intense without warning, because you are no longer interested in staying on the surface of things. Under this energy, small talk begins to feel exhausting. Your soul wants depth now. It wants honesty. It wants substance. But the most powerful realizations arriving through this transit may not involve other people at all. They may involve the relationship you have with yourself. Because once Pluto opens this psychological doorway, it becomes impossible not to notice your own patterns too. The excuses you repeat, the emotional loops you keep recycling, the stories you have created to justify staying where you are, even when some deeper part of you already knows you have outgrown it. This energy exposes self-deception with startling clarity. Suddenly you see the moments where fear disguised itself as practicality. You recognize where comfort became stagnation. You understand how often you silenced your instincts just to avoid uncertainty or rejection. And yes, Those realizations can shake you emotionally because there is something deeply unsettling about seeing yourself without illusion for the first time in a long while. But this is not punishment from the universe. It is liberation disguised as discomfort. Because once truth enters your awareness completely, it cannot be buried again. Once you genuinely recognize a pattern, you lose the ability to unknow it. And that is precisely when real transformation becomes possible. The people who lean into this transit, instead of resisting it, are going to experience some of the most honest and life-altering conversations they have had in years. Some will finally express emotions they have hidden for far too long. Others will ask for what they truly want, instead of settling for emotional scraps out of fear. Many will stop tolerating relationships, situations, or environments that no longer align with who they are becoming. This energy cuts through noise with ruthless precision. It strips away distraction and forces you to confront what actually matters underneath all the performances and emotional avoidance. But Pluto always carries a shadow side too, and pretending otherwise would be dangerous. Because the same penetrating insight capable of bringing truth can also become destructive if it is used unconsciously. Pluto governs power, control, obsession, and psychological manipulation. Under this transit, you may notice an urge to investigate too deeply, to control situations through information, or to use emotional insight as leverage against others. There can be a temptation to become consumed by certain thoughts, unable to stop analyzing, unable to let go, unable to trust what cannot yet be fully understood. This is where awareness becomes essential. The purpose of this energy is understanding, not domination. The goal is clarity, not control. Speak honestly, but do not turn truth into a weapon. See clearly, but do not allow awareness to transform into paranoia. The second message unfolding through this Mercury-Pluto alignment is unavoidable. Truth is surfacing whether you feel prepared for it or not. The only choice you have is how you respond when it arrives. Meet it with courage instead of resistance. Meet it with honesty instead of control. Because once the awakening from Uranus has shaken your consciousness open, and once Pluto has excavated what was buried underneath, there is still one final stage left in this sequence. And this last message changes everything because it asks what you intend to build from everything you have learned. The final lesson arrives between May 19th and May 22nd, when Mercury forms supportive sextiles to Neptune and Saturn. If the earlier transits were about awakening and excavation, this final phase becomes about creation, construction, manifestation, direction. On May 19th, at exactly 5:12 at night, Mercury forms a sextile to Neptune in Aries, and suddenly the energy shifts from pure analysis into imagination. This is where logic and intuition begin working together instead of against each other. The rational mind softens just enough to allow inspiration, symbolism, creativity, and spiritual awareness to enter the conversation. Neptune dissolves rigid mental boundaries. It teaches Mercury how to think beyond literal facts and connect with meaning on a deeper level. During this transit, ordinary conversations can suddenly feel profound. Ideas begin carrying emotional and spiritual significance. Thoughts transform into visions. This is the aspect where possibility becomes visible before it physically exists. Artists, musicians, writers, storytellers, and visionaries naturally thrive under this energy because Neptune allows imagination to flow through communication effortlessly. But this influence is not limited to creative people alone. Anyone can access this frequency now. It is the ability to envision a different future with enough emotional clarity that it begins feeling real before it arrives. It is the moment where the mind stops asking only what is practical and starts asking what is possible. But vision alone is never enough to change reality. Dreams without structure dissolve quickly into fantasy, and that is exactly why Saturn enters the story next. On May 22nd at exactly 2 in the afternoon, Mercury forms a sextile to Saturn in Aries, and the atmosphere changes once again. Saturn does not deal in fantasies. Saturn builds. Saturn organizes. Saturn takes insight and demands discipline from it. This transit acts like the final missing piece connecting everything together. The awakening from Uranus. The truth from Pluto. The vision from Neptune. Saturn gathers all of it and asks one unavoidable question. What are you going to do with this now? This is where ideas stop being abstract and begin becoming real. Plans form. Strategies emerge. Decisions solidify. Saturn rewards consistency, effort, patience, and follow-through. It teaches that clarity without action eventually becomes wasted potential. But because this is a sextile, the energy is supportive rather than punishing. Saturn is not blocking your path here. It is offering you the structure necessary to build something lasting from the revelations you have received. This is the moment where breakthroughs become blueprints, where insight becomes execution, where internal transformation begins manifesting externally through real choices and tangible action. The third message becomes beautifully simple, even though its implications are profound. You have already received the awakening. You have already uncovered the truth. Now it is time to build something from it. And that is why this period cannot be approached passively. Mercury in Gemini demands movement, communication, curiosity, learning, and engagement. This energy wants participation. It wants you to think actively, speak honestly, connect deeply, write openly, and follow the thoughts arriving through your awareness instead of dismissing them. The insights entering your life over the next several days will move quickly, almost faster than your conscious mind can fully organize them. That is why you must capture them while they are arriving. Write everything down, every realization, every strange intuitive flash, every sudden idea, every emotional truth that surfaces unexpectedly. Because many of the thoughts arriving now are not random at all. They are pieces of a larger blueprint your future self is trying to reveal to you before the rest of your life catches up with it. Do not allow these realizations to pass through your life unnoticed, because the information arriving during this window is too important to trust to memory alone. The thoughts entering your awareness now are moving with unusual speed, and many of them are carrying messages your future self will eventually look back on and recognize as turning points. Write them down immediately. Record the strange ideas, the sudden emotional clarity, the conversations that linger in your mind long after they end. There is a reason Mercury in Gemini amplifies mental movement so intensely during this period. Your consciousness is processing at a faster frequency, and what feels like random inspiration in the moment may later reveal itself as the exact guidance that redirected your path. This is especially important as Mercury forms its trine to Pluto on May 19th, because that alignment gives you something many people spend years trying to find: the courage to finally say what your soul has been holding back. There are truths inside you waiting for release. Questions you've avoided asking because you already sense the answers might change everything. Conversations postponed out of fear of conflict, rejection, or emotional exposure. But this transit cuts directly through hesitation. Suddenly, the fear of remaining silent becomes heavier than the fear of speaking honestly. You may find yourself expressing emotions you have rehearsed privately for years, but never fully communicated out loud. You may finally confront someone about a situation that has quietly drained your energy for too long. Or perhaps the hardest conversation will not happen with another person at all, but with yourself. Because under this energy, self-honesty becomes unavoidable. Gemini naturally seeks understanding through curiosity. And during this transit, your greatest breakthroughs will arrive when you stop assuming you already know the full story. Ask deeper questions. Investigate your own beliefs. Challenge the explanations you have accepted simply because they felt familiar. Some of the truths arriving now will completely change the way you see your relationships, your ambitions, your fears, and even your sense of identity, and this process becomes even more powerful when shared with others. Mercury rules communication for a reason. This is not an energy meant for isolation. Reach out to people who stimulate your thinking. Have conversations that go beyond surface-level comfort. Exchange ideas openly. You may be shocked by what emerges when two minds operating at this frequency begin reflecting truth back to each other. A single conversation during this window could unlock realizations powerful enough to redirect the course of your future. But this energy is not only asking you to think differently, it is asking you to create. The Mercury-Neptune sextile opens the door to vision, imagination, symbolism, and spiritual inspiration. Suddenly, possibilities become visible where limitations once existed. You begin seeing not only what reality currently is, but what it could become. The Neptune influence softens the mind just enough to let intuition and creativity flow freely into your awareness. And then Saturn arrives to give those visions structure. The Mercury. Saturn's sextile on May 22nd offers discipline, planning, and execution. Together, these energies create an extraordinary combination, inspiration supported by practical action. This is why you cannot keep your ideas trapped inside your head now. Begin the project. Write the first page. Outline the plan. Start building the thing that keeps returning to your mind, no matter how many times you try to ignore it. The visions arriving through this transit are not random fantasies. They are invitations toward a different future. But as powerful as this window is, there are also behaviors that can quietly sabotage the transformation trying to unfold. One of the greatest dangers during this period is overthinking to the point of paralysis. Your mind will move quickly under Mercury in Gemini, perhaps faster than it has in months. You will analyze possibilities, recognize patterns, and imagine multiple outcomes simultaneously. But eventually, there comes a moment when thinking alone becomes avoidance, disguised as preparation. You cannot endlessly process without eventually taking action. At some point, you must trust the clarity you have already received and move forward before fear convinces you to retreat back into hesitation. Another danger arrives through Pluto itself, because insight can become seductive. The ability to read people deeply, to understand emotional motivations and hidden truths, creates a sense of psychological power that can easily become unhealthy if used unconsciously. You may notice the temptation to manipulate situations through what you know, to emotionally control conversations by anticipating reactions, to obsess over details until your mind becomes trapped inside endless investigation. Be careful with this energy. Awareness is meant to deepen compassion and understanding, not feed paranoia or control. Use your insight to heal, not dominate. Speak truth without turning it into a weapon. There is also a risk of dismissing the visions arriving through Neptune simply because they do not appear logical at first. Modern life trains people to distrust intuition unless it can immediately be explained rationally. But Neptune communicates differently. It speaks through symbolism, emotion, imagination, dreams, and subtle inner knowing. Some of the most important guidance arriving during this period will come quietly, through moments that seem poetic or mystical rather than practical. Do not ignore those experiences simply because they cannot yet be proven. And finally, do not abandon the work required to manifest what you are being shown. Saturn will not reward shortcuts during this transit. Insight without discipline eventually fades into regret. Inspiration without effort dissolves into fantasy. If you receive the vision, but refuse to build toward it consistently, you may later watch the opportunity disappear while wondering why nothing changed. This entire energetic sequence reaches its culmination on May 31st, when the full moon in Sagittarius rises at 9 degrees and 55 minutes. And this is where every realization, every breakthrough, every conversation, and every action from the previous weeks suddenly connects into a much larger picture. Sagittarius stands opposite Gemini in astrology, and while Gemini gathers information, Sagittarius seeks wisdom. Gemini asks, what is happening? Sagittarius asks why it matters. Gemini collects facts. Sagittarius transforms facts into philosophy and meaning. This full moon forces integration between those two energies. It demands that you step back and ask yourself what all these realizations are ultimately leading toward. What story is emerging beneath all the information you have gathered? What deeper truth has been trying to reveal itself through every conversation, every challenge, every insight, and every emotional awakening this month? During this full moon, you may feel tension between logic and faith, between details and purpose, between intellectual understanding and spiritual meaning. But inside that tension, something profound begins forming. Wisdom. Real wisdom is never just information alone. Wisdom is experience transformed into understanding. It is truth, lived deeply enough that it changes who you are. And that is what this entire month has been preparing you for. The electric awakening, brought by Mercury and Uranus, the psychological excavation initiated through Pluto, the visionary possibilities revealed through Neptune, the disciplined construction demanded by Saturn, and finally, the philosophical integration offered by the Sagittarius full moon on May 31st. This has not been random astrology unfolding in disconnected pieces. It has been a complete initiation sequence designed to transform the way you think, perceive, communicate, and create your reality moving forward. This is why today matters so much. When Mercury entered Gemini this morning, the external world did not suddenly change overnight. You changed. Your ability to process truth expanded. Your awareness accelerated. Your communication sharpened. Your perception deepened. And those changes have the power to echo through the rest of your life if you allow them to. But not everyone will respond to this energy the same way. Some people will feel these shifts and consciously move with them. They will embrace the realizations arriving through their awareness. They will have conversations that heal emotional wounds carried for years. They will act on insights that later become life-changing opportunities. They will begin June 1st, barely recognizing the version of themselves that existed back on May 16th, because their consciousness will have evolved so dramatically in such a short period of time. Others will resist the process entirely. They will feel the intensity and retreat into distraction. They will dismiss intuitive guidance as meaningless overthinking. They will avoid difficult truths because facing them feels uncomfortable. They will allow visions to disappear without ever acting on them. And the difference between these two paths will not come down to luck, destiny, or chance. It will come down to choice. You are hearing this message at this exact moment for a reason. Something inside you was meant to recognize itself in these words. You are being invited to step fully into this frequency instead of running from it. Because today is not simply another ordinary day passing through the calendar. It is a threshold. And once you cross it consciously, once you allow Mercury and Gemini to expand your awareness, and once you begin acting on the 3 messages revealed during this cycle, there is no returning to the previous version of yourself. The old version, the one who moved through life with slower awareness, blurred perception, and unspoken truth, cannot follow you where this energy is leading. What emerges instead is someone sharper, clearer, more conscious, more disciplined, and more aligned with their own inner knowing than ever before. The moment has already arrived. The only thing left is deciding whether you are willing to step fully into it.